The Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay. Any agenda additions, deletions, or amendments? Mr. City Manager, you have comments for anything?
No, sir. We have no report.
Okay. All right, Council, before we get into the meeting, you have a consent agenda, items A through E. Do I have a motion on the consent agenda? Moved and seconded, moved by Mr. Plank and seconded by Mr. Gardner. Any question on the motion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. New business, Baltimore, Washington Rapid Rail Maglev project. We have some guests tonight. What I'm going to ask people to do is, as the presentation begins, if you can kind of bear with it, I would appreciate it if you try not to interrupt the speaker while they're going through. Let's be polite and pleasant. And when it comes your turn to speak, like I say, if you can keep your comments to about 3 minutes, everybody will get an opportunity to speak. Welcome, sir. If you want to identify yourself for the folks here and the folks watching on television.
Hello, David Henley from New York, from BWRR. Next to me is Furkan Siddiqui, also my colleague from BWRR.
Welcome.
I'd like to first ask just to confirm that everybody got a copy of this project-sponsored disclaimer.
We did. You're speaking for yourself.
Yes. Just wanted to reiterate that because the MTA is not able to make it here, we're going to be discussing this project in general terms, not getting into environmental aspects, et cetera, alternative alignments. That's an area they will cover in their next upcoming open house, which we hope will be in the next couple of months. So I'll go through the presentation now. So who are we? We're a American-owned, Maryland-based franchised railroad. We're associated with the Northeast Maglev, another company that's affiliated with us, who's also American-owned, Maryland-based firm that's promoting the deployment of SC Maglev. And we're partnered with Central Japan Railway, JR Central, who developed and operates the SC Maglev in Japan. It's a bullet train. They also invented the bullet train in 1964. In 1964, the first train ever to go 220 miles per hour was developed. It was the fastest train in the world. So what did they start doing? They started thinking about the next generation and started working right away on SC Maglev. So let's talk a little bit about the corridor here, the Northeast Corridor where we all live. Today we have 51 million people. That's growing to 58 million. We're very small in size but big in population. 2% of the land mass of the Northeast Corridor is 2% of the land mass of the entire U.S. is the Northeast Corridor. 24 million jobs. That's going up. We're a very large economy. $1 out of $5 is generated in the Northeast Corridor. That's equivalent to the economy of Great Britain. And we're getting bigger and more crowded. Here are some of the issues that we're beset with on the infrastructure side. Highways. Everybody that drives a car knows there's an unpredictability of highways. We have the worst highway bottlenecks in the country. From Washington to New York to Philadelphia to Baltimore, we've all experienced huge average hours of delay increases since 1982. Railways, the legacy of the shared track of Amtrak with other commuters, with freight, etc., make it an unpredictable, inefficient arrangement, and it's not going to get any better. It's within that right-of-way, which cannot really expand all that significantly. So it's a bad model. Airways are the recipient of these two deficiencies because, for example, a plane trip from New York to Washington is about 200 miles per hour. That's not a plane trip that normal citizen in Europe or Asia would take because there's so many different options, rail options. So it's increasing the pressure on the aviation community to start these short hop flights, which are very inefficient and very high polluting. Now, the need for high-speed rail in this corridor is long recognized. That first study there on the left at the bottom was published by the FRA in 1970, and it stressed that the need for true high-speed rail was necessary because of what? Because of the corridor situation, because of the highway situation, because of the growing population. Every other year since then, we do another study. We like to do studies in the U.S., and they all concluded the same thing, that we need high-speed rail in the Northeast Corridor. Now, some of you may remember a few years ago there was a previous attempt to deploy maglev in 2003. An earlier version of maglev was embarked upon. There was an alignment that was identified. There were station locations that were identified. But most of it was at grade with significant surface impacts. So an EIS was performed. It went through the entire process, but didn't make it past the FRA with a record of decision. So a lot of the decisions that were made, or a lot of ideas that were developed during that study, we've studied, and we're going to have lessons learned from this study. So what's the vision? The vision is the fastest train in the world, leveraging the technology that's been built and perfected over the last 50 years in Japan and bringing it here. From Washington to New York in 1 hour. That's 500 kilometers per hour, 311 miles per hour. Washington with a stop at Philadelphia to New York in 1 hour. Then there's a local version, which would take you from Washington to BWI, to Baltimore, to Wilmington, to Philadelphia Airport, to Philadelphia, and then Newark Airport and on to New York. And the reason why we want to connect up those airports is the same reason it's working in places like Asia and in Europe, where, say, if you live in Washington but your flight is out of Philadelphia, you can take the maglev directly to the airport and then ride into your airplane, and off you go to Paris or wherever you're going. I'm sorry. A little bit about the SC maglev. It's in operation. As I mentioned, it's 50 years in development, 1 million miles traveled in development, fastest in the world. It went through a rigorous certification process, a rigorous environmental process, all of which was completed successfully. Construction began in 2014 on the first phase. 2027 is the date of opening. Now, how does it work? It's not like a regular railroad. On the left, you have electric, lots of moving parts, catenary, pantographs, steel wheels, and rails. In this case, it sits within a guideway, a little unit, a little cradle. And on the guideway are coils. And within the body of the train, there are coils. They're superconducting magnetic coils that utilize, they feed off each other, between each other, and they provide the ability to accelerate, decelerate, guide, and levitate. So what happens is the first 60 miles per hour, you're traveling just like you would on an airplane with airplane tires, in fact. Once you get up to 60 miles per hour, the magnetic field takes hold. The plane lifts up, the tires retract, and you're on your way. You're basically floating on a cushion of air and can get up to speed, meaning 500 kilometers per hour in 2 minutes, and you decelerate at the same rate. All right, so this is the project that we're talking about today. This is the first phase of the project, the Washington to Baltimore area. And we picked this area because, one, it's been studied before. Two, the FRA was expressly interested in this particular territory. So this is what we thought of as the first part of our business plan, which is obviously to go up to New York. But in this effort, we got a corridor that's, well, I'll explain the corridor now. Corridor is 40 miles long, 10 miles wide, 2 major cities, 4 counties, numerous natural and historic resources, lots of land that's publicly and privately owned, lots of government facilities, and lots of parks. So we're threading a very fine needle through an area of Maryland that has been studied a lot over the past. As I said, all those studies have been looking at this area, and we are going to be working with the NEPA team as they progress this alignment and alternatives study. We're not in charge of that. They're in charge of it. It's an independent study. We're contributing, obviously, but we are working very closely and meeting with all of these folks as often as we can. Now, I talked about the NEPA team. This is the way it works. Federal money, it's a federal grant, comes down through the Maryland DOT, and then it takes a right turn on this slide where the environmental process is handled independently. The sponsor does not control the EIS process. There's a fine line. These are the significant roles and responsibilities, and that's sort of why I'm not talking about the EIS tonight, because our colleagues at the MTA and AECOM are the ones in charge of that, so I don't want to steal their thunder. But our team is managed through MEDCO, who's represented here tonight, and we supply all the engineering support and permitting support. Okay, a little bit about the funding. It was a grant, and this is to cover the environmental impact statement. Which is going to look at different alignments and measure those impacts. It's also going to be doing a very significant add-on, which is the rule of particular applicability, which is an FRA requirement. It's a safety requirement to basically detail all the operational issues and know-how and protocols and procedures that will be developed in order to run the railroad. So millions have been spent to date on putting together a huge amount of effort. No state money is going to be utilized. So what was the money spent on? The money we spent to date? Well, to determine engineering feasibility over the last several years, we've looked at various feasible routes, which included walking this study area and walking up north of Maryland on into New Jersey up to New York. We determined financial feasibility, which was an independent investment grade was performed. A ridership and revenue study was commissioned by Japan Bank, not us. They confirmed financial feasibility. Their findings were confirmed by a peer group that reviewed their findings and suggested a follow-up plan case study, which also confirmed financial feasibility. What else have we accomplished? We received a rail franchise from Maryland Public Service Commission, which allows us to operate as a railroad in Maryland. Okay, and we've agreed with Central Japan Railway on a transfer of the technology to the U.S. to license it. Public outreach. Now, this is the NEPA process. Now, this is all I'm going to say about NEPA tonight, but this is the process that's written down in the AECOM and MTA record and contract that they're going to do 20 rounds of public meetings. There were already public meetings done in December and in April, and there's more to come as soon as they get the next phase crystallized with the FRA in terms of where they are with their findings. Now, this is just the bare minimum, because what FERCON and I and others have been doing for the last year is going up and down the state, meeting with county planning folks, transportation officials, elected officials, industry groups, business groups, anybody that'll ask us, we've gone and met with to explain our project. Okay, a little bit about the requirements You can't just plop a high-speed rail anywhere. It has to be able to go fast. And to go fast, it has to have the horizontal and vertical geometry. So we've established that in order to make sure that the train can run at the maximum 500 kilometers per hour. Most of the alignment is going to be operating mostly either in underground or above ground, an elevated facility, probably roughly guessing 50-50. Don't hold me to that. It all does come through the EIS process. We have to accommodate the shifting of speed at top speed safely. We can't just have sharp turns. We don't want people to feel the turn at 500 kilometers per hour. That could be a rough ride. So it has to be accommodated over a long distance. So we're seeking an alignment that allows all of that operation to proceed favorably. A couple of typical cross sections. The one on the left, the viaduct. The average height will be about 18 feet, and at the top about 50 feet wide, and then obviously it slims down as you get closer to the ground. Typical tunnel section is approximately the same, about 50, 60 feet wide. Typically, the tunnel will be 50 feet underground, but if we're under, say, the airport, BWI, it'd be closer to 80, and if we're coming into downtown DC, downtown Baltimore, it'd probably be about the same. So, it's a big project, so it creates a lot of economic benefits. It creates a lot of jobs. It creates a lot of GDP increase. Across the country, it'd be 205,000 jobs from construction, and then permanently about close to 15,000. But let's not also forget, even if you're not lucky enough to get economic benefit for, say, a job or spin-off effect from the job, the air will be in just a whole better place. All that reduced greenhouse gas, all that reduced carbon monoxide, all that reduced nitrogen oxides, with people getting out of cars, that's a huge benefit for everybody. Better air. Okay, now, I'm not trying to game the system by any way because the selection process is going on, but we have to look at everything and try to be proactive. So we've looked at the bike trail. We know that's a huge issue for a lot of folks, the WB&A. And we thought, okay, what could we do that would be a benefit? And we came up with some ideas. And I know this is a pretty picture, and it's done by a high-priced consultant and makes it look like it's like God's green earth, and look at that, Well, this is a real picture, and you can see the synergy under the Bright Line in Miami, where they've been able to weave together the two different modes together very well, I think. It's very successful. This is the sort of thing that the kind of ideas we would like to bring, if it is the WB&A, and we would provide state-of-the-art amenities such as these items here, if this becomes the choice. Okay, and the choice is for all of us. It is, as I mentioned at the beginning, the Northeast Corridor has outgrown its infrastructure, and future growth will continue to strain it. The need for high-speed rail is long recognized, as I pointed out, over years, decades of study. And SC Maglev is a proven technology that will provide a transformational alternative. And it will also spur economic development in this region and beyond. So the choice is up to everybody here. It's not just us because we want it, it's because we have to prove it to you. It's part of the process that has to be done appropriately with proper context for everybody's input. It is a very, very, very complicated corridor. We recognize that. I listed out all those constraints, all those issues that have to be dealt with. But it comes a time where we have to start making a decision that for a problem that's been long recognized. It's been recognized for decades. So we can continue the way we're going right now and just, fixing what's there and trying to prop it up. That's going to cost lots of money. Or we can invest and join together and decide, yes, this is the idea, its time is right, the time is right. And we get people out of their cars, we get reduced highway congestion, the reduced need to continue to highway expand, get people out of their airlines, which are very high polluting, the short haul flights, and the need to expand. So I'll leave you with this, and I have hard copies of BWR contact, the MDOT contact, and MTA contact. And I thank you for your kind attention.
Community context comments in a minute, and subsequent to that, we'll have specific questions for you. One of the questions I know you'd be ready to anticipate is, we've been told that you're looking at 4 or 5 potential thoroughfares or potential moves, and obviously one of the questions will be, does one of those stand out for you or whatever? So those are the kinds of questions I should expect.
Let me just, I know we're jumping ahead. I do want to caution the room that as I started off the beginning of this presentation, we've been advised by our partners that the NEPA process is their bailiwick, not ours. And so the alignment and alternative choice is driven by that process. We're a player in it, but they specifically did not want discussion of that today. And
Hey, come on, folks.
Hello?
Folks, come on.
I think I was pretty clear at the very beginning of my statement.
Yeah.
But in any case, if anybody wants to read the notice that I got from the MTA, they're free to read it. Yeah. We committed, Al, 2 months ago, 3 months ago? 3 months ago, to come here and talk about the project. I've talked about the project. I would love to talk about all aspects of the NEPA process, but I'm not in charge of that. And I was cautioned not to speak about that. But I am here to listen to you, and I think we need to have that dialogue. I'm not constrained against speaking to you and listening to you and answering. So.
Excuse me, I appreciate the interest, but I appreciate if we kind of withhold the questions from that.
I just want to say again, what I said at the very beginning is, and I could show you the document that I received today. I'm cautioned not to speak about the alignments. That process is going forward right now with the NEPA team. Told you about that fine line that the MTA and AECOM are handling, and they're working with the FRA right now as we speak. They're making lots of progress. And the problem is, as I explained, it is a very, very fine needle that has to be thread, and if they're taking longer than we had planned, that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. That means they're confronting issues and trying to address those issues in a very sensitive way. So let's let them take as long as they need so they can get it right. The part about getting it right is hearing from you, and let's hear from you.
Why don't you, if you're through with your presentation for the moment, let me get the speakers on. First off, I'm going to make another minor change. We have a couple of guests from our state delegation, and I'm going to let them speak first. Many of you here are not only important people, but you're all parents. And I know in a minute you're going to understand why I'm going to bring Delegate Valentino Smith up. She just got a call that her child came home from a sporting event and his arm may be broken, so she's going to leave here and go to the doctor. Delegate Valentina Smith.
I think I'm here.
Well, you have to go to the microphone for the people at home. And we're also joined by our State Senator, Douglas Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Obviously, a very important meeting. I will watch from home as soon as I get there. It's the public's meeting, so I won't take time testifying now, but I will commit as the state delegate to have strong communication channels with MTA as to why they're not here tonight presenting. And I just got up and asked the city manager through it, why isn't MTA here? I understand that they declined at the very last minute or with short notice. And so I can tell you, I can also, don't usually speak for Senator Peters, but I will, that we will work to make sure that that state agency presents itself here in a timely fashion to explain the process that they've gone through. Thank you.
Senator, do you want to make a comment?
I'm your new staff member.
Okay. I hope we can afford it.
Let me just say, Mr. Mayor, that everything you say here is very important to us. We will craft a position based on what you have to say, not what others have to say. We work for you, and it works best when we can all be aligned together, the city, the county, and the state. So I'm here to listen to you.
Okay. All right. And as we indicated, obviously we're going to have a series of these events with other players in this process. I don't want to, in any time tonight, underestimate the challenge associated with this issue, the concerns associated with this issue, the anxiety associated with this issue, and the plans. I mean, I understand there's a competitive, competing interest in looking at issues. I'm willing to concede that some people are making a bona fide, honest look at the future in terms of transportation and needs and looking at alternatives. But we also want to look not only at the cost-benefit recovery side of the equation, we want to look at the effect of the equation as well. So that's what we'll be doing as we go through. All right, so as I call your name, if you would come up to the podium, and if you could keep your comments to 3 to 4 or 5 minutes, I'd appreciate it, because we have a lot of people who want to speak, and I want all the neighbors that want to have an opportunity to speak. So my first speaker is Adrian Rad. Welcome, sir. Good evening.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you for letting the public speak at this hearing. And my name is Adrian Rad. As I was mentioned, I live off of 197 and Racetrack Road. That's near Old Bowie. And I'm a member of a grassroots group of citizens with growing concerns about this proposed maglev. My wife and I first learned about this project at an open house in April. Presentation materials suggested that we were nearly halfway through the NEPA process, and I understand that, you know, there aren't people who can answer that question, but that's a significant concern. There was information provided on several different routes, and it was stated that the final route was going to be selected and an environmental assessment was going to be completed perhaps as early as the end of this year. We were also told that if everything went well, construction could start as early as 2019. Now that's really very early. And then I think as has been demonstrated here, this is not a project by itself. It's just the first phase of a much larger project. And that second phase is from Baltimore to New York. And I must say that the open house and unfortunately this meeting presentation has raised more questions than it answered. For example, recently there's been a document purporting to be the final scoping report for this project was posted on the website, but it's unclear if that's been approved, et cetera. So there's lots of questions on that. As I said, there's growing concern in our community and across the state because of the public-private nature of this project. The potential billions of dollars of foreign investments that haven't really been discussed here, and an increased interest both by state and federal administrations. This portion, the project between Baltimore and Washington, may become a reality in the very near future without the independent, deliberative evaluation and reviews that it deserves. Many of the claims of the benefits that are being made by the proponents of the project are questionable when you consider the local effect at best and possibly misleading. The thousands of high-paid jobs are probably not going to benefit Bowie or its residents. There are no local stops, so there's probably not going to be much in terms of commercial or economic benefits. I believe that they're mixing the potential benefits of the large-scale project with the small portion between Baltimore and Washington. And we have to ask ourselves, on its own, this could potentially be an economic and commercial disaster. It's claimed to reduce traffic and other travel headaches. Well, clearly that's not going to happen here. As I mentioned, the maglev doesn't have stops. And so therefore, it's not suitable as a commuter rail. And the construction would clearly create problems. So there are some questions that really should be considered. Will there be any jobs for the local residents? Are most of the jobs temporary construction jobs? Has there been a cost-benefit analysis that we can see that shows that this is better alternative for the region than fixing or expanding MARC, Amtrak, 95, or even building the metro extension to BWI and BWI Thurgood Marshall Airport, or even the Baltimore? Can a private company be profitable? See, I think that's really the question that we have to ask. Can a private company be profitable just between Baltimore and Washington? Or will it need state, federal subsidies? If so, for how long? What happens if that company goes bankrupt? Waiting and hoping for the train to be extended to New York. Remember, that might not happen until 2030 or 2035. And as I said earlier, final scoping report, is that an official Federal Railroad Administration document? There are questions that have been raised in that report. When and if that document is approved, when are those answers going to be provided? Ultimately, I believe that we, the people of Bowie, may lose our homes, our community, and we, the people of Maryland, will be left holding the bag. I ask that the City Council and our elected officials carefully consider the potential significant impacts of this project on our communities, both good and bad. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Next speaker is Tara Sudell, and she'll be followed by Aviva Dubinsky. Welcome, ma'am.
Hello, and thank you for allowing us to speak today. We truly appreciate it. My name is Tara Guevara, and my family owns a 5-acre farm on Hillmead Road near Bowie, and our property touches the WB&A rail system. We operate a horse and animal sanctuary on this property, which is currently the only one of its kind in Bowie, and the only Maryland Horse Industry Board certified horse discovery center in the state. And, sorry, not in the state, in the county, in PG County. Our sanctuary was recently featured on the Fox 5 Zip Trip to Bowie as a #2 place to visit, and we serve the community and draw in visitors from all over. There are currently 2 general paths for the maglev proposed to run through Bowie. They're loosely interpreted, vague, and meandering colored lines, as you could have seen on some of the earlier graphics, and it leaves a wide range of areas in the potential crosshairs of the project because the group cannot clarify for us where these paths are going to go. I'm here to voice my concerns that we have as citizens over the WB&A trail impact as well as area historical impact. The first path, which according to their own published screening criteria, is to run the train along the general line of the WB&A trail system, and you heard them address that today. This path currently has the most promising qualifications according to the group and their screening criteria, and they have already moved forward with procuring and obtaining a use permit to operate a train on the WB&A right-of-way. The second path, which according to their screening criteria holds the second most significant promise, will run the maglev along the existing Amtrak corridor. And while at first glance this seems like a more reasonable alternative because of use of existing infrastructure, deviations in the general path due to the operational needs and constraints of the maglev, as they told you, lines can't be tight, they have to be sloping and easy for the train to maintain its speed, will pose threats to homes and businesses, historic sites, farms, agriculture, and open spaces all around Bowie, with no certainty at this time as to which areas will be impacted. This is disconcerting as a homeowner of a significantly historic property which is currently at direct risk. If the maglev is constructed along the WBNA, my home will be taken for construction purposes because it is literally against the WBNA. The group has represented the trail as a defunct and abandoned rail line in public documents related to the procurement of their operating license. We all know that it is not a defunct and abandoned rail line. The 10-mile paved stretch of trail, which is currently maintained by MNCPP, was opened in 2000. As a person who literally watches this trail every day from my yard and my farm, which would be just to the left where those trees are is the trail, and it runs literally directly behind that whole tree line. I can see hikers and bikers from the back of my barn. I can tell you that it is utilized daily, round the clock, by bikers, walkers, strollers, horseback riders, people exactly, people on roller skates, people from our area, people from out of the area, just enjoying it. In addition, if you follow the line of the WBNA, you'll see that it passes through many significant areas which have historic sites, historic significance to our area, some on the National Historic Register, some as listed as historically significant to our area. And as I'm sure you're all aware of, just look behind you, you see the significance of the history of Bowie, and we don't want to lose any of those things. I can
I'll have to ask you to start wrapping up.
Sure. Basically, running along the Amtrak lines will just take it potentially straight through Old Bowie. So that is going to destroy your, things that we already have there that are historic. Here are some of the historic places. The Railway Museum would be at risk running through Bowie. So we're going to lose a lot of potentially important things that basically make Bowie what it is. So this is not going to benefit our community. We won't have a stop here. We won't be able to ride this train as a commuter train, and it's going to take away a lot of significant things that are special to Bowie and unique to Bowie. Thank you.
Thank you. Aviva Trubisky, welcome, ma'am, and she'll be followed by Al Bauman.
Good evening. My name's Aviva Nebeski. I live at Horsepen Hill Farm in Bowie. We're the third owners of this historic property, originally known as Little Page Farm, and it was once owned by someone you may all know, the thoroughbred breeder, racehorse breeder Carlisle or Jiggs Lancaster, who was the former county attorney. Just across the street from us is Normal School Road. It was named for the first black school in Maryland. Our pecan trees are grown from seedlings from Thomas Jefferson's plantation. The house itself is 100 years old. I believe that our house is one of the most beautiful places in the world. It has beautiful rolling hills and a lazy creek. We've lived here since February of 1999, and we've lovingly restored the house and created a premier horse facility. We're one of more than a dozen horse farms in Bowie. Horses, as you may know, were once the primary industry in Maryland, and Bowie housed a thriving track. Some of the first racing thoroughbreds were imported from England to Bowie. This is an industry with deep roots. These farms are part of what makes Bowie a unique and beautiful community and draws many people to it. Our green spaces provide habitat for wildlife, and several of our horse farms have started hives for honeybees in an effort to combat catastrophic hive collapse from decimating the honeybee population. Our farms provide more than beauty. They're businesses that serve our community through boarding of horses, providing lessons, providing classes in animal husbandry to Girl and Boy Scouts, therapeutic services, as well as providing opportunities for people to experience what makes horses and being at one with nature so special. We're small businesses, but we are so much more. Our farms provide green space to help maintain the water table and prevent excessive water runoff to the Patuxent and other bay tributaries. Our farms are required to have special licenses through the state to make sure that we protect the water table. We provide environments for wildlife like Canada geese, deer, possum, raccoons, fox, rabbits, hawks, honeybees, hummingbirds, and you name it, we've got it. They'd have nowhere else to go, except into your gardens and across your streets to be hit by cars. If we cover our land with concrete, what will happen to us? How will we ensure oxygenation and clean water? How does a concrete cradle 18 feet above ground spanning 50 feet improve the quality of life for the residents of Bowie? What are the short-term effects of construction? Decimation of land, contamination of groundwater and local marshes, elimination of trails. And the long-term effects? What does exposure to high levels of magnetics do to people, to animals, to plants? If we go above ground, we block out the sun. We kill off everything underneath, despite his pretty pictures. I don't believe that. 50 feet, pretty wide, guys. If we go along the ground, we've got a 50-foot concrete bunker. How is any of this a good thing? I urge the Bowie City Council and all of us here today to reject this coming through our community. We will reap no benefits from this. The routes being studied will touch almost every bit of green space here in Bowie. We will become a wasteland of train track. I don't see how anything about this is positive. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate that. Mr. Baumann will be followed by Gary Aikuzi. Welcome, sir. Good to see you.
Yeah, good evening. Good to see you,
No
too.
guitar tonight, huh?
Pardon me?
No guitar tonight.
No guitar tonight, no. Not tonight. My name is Albert Baumann. I have been a Bowie resident for 41 years. And my house and my neighborhood are not within the current alternative routes for the maglev train. But as a citizen of Bowie, I'm deeply concerned about the impact this will have on our city and our community. Former speakers have mentioned the red and the green line. I want to focus on the yellow line. And if you look at the path of the yellow line, can you put that up there? You got the path right there, and now I'm going to show a cross-section, that area right in there. That one, yeah. Okay, that shows you 1,000 feet, and those are the number of homes that are in a 1,000-foot swath of that's going to be needed to cut this road through, or I'm sorry, this train through there. So the project requires a 1,000-foot wide area to operate all the way through. And if you look at this and look at the number of houses, it's probably about 130 houses right in that area. And this is just a small segment of a 40-mile route. Now, you know these neighborhoods. They're usually young families with children who know that Bowie is a great place to raise kids, or else they're older folks who've raised their families and have been in their homes for decades. But can you imagine the emotional impact on these hundreds, possibly thousands of folks, to have their homes destroyed and their lives uprooted for the purpose of providing a few elite passengers the opportunity to save a half hour in order to save about a half hour of commute time from D.C. to Baltimore? And what about the residents whose homes are not in that swath but are on the other sides? I mean, there really have not been any studies on any of the long-term effects of what this magnetic electricity has. And so, you know, there's a risk to them that really is unknown. In addition to the upheaval of families being forced out of their homes and the significant population decrease in the city, hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe millions, is going to be lost to the city in tax revenue. Additionally, the population decrease is going to cause Bowie businesses to lose sales and is going to create more challenge for the Bowie city to attract businesses to fill the vacant commercial spaces. I focus my comments on Bowie, but the points I'm making apply to the whole affected area. There's absolutely no benefit to any community in Prince George's or Anne Arundel counties. The impact that the taking of the residences, businesses, parks, schools, churches, or whatever's in the way is too high a price to pay for an expensive, disruptive project with no benefit to the local communities or the counties. For sure, we need better transportation, and it will take huge sums of money, but we must provide transportation services that benefit the whole community and not waste our time and dollars on projects such as the limited benefit of maglev. And I thank you for this.
Mr. Iacuzzi will be followed by Lori Thompson. Welcome, sir. Good to see you.
My name is Gerard Iacuzzi. I live in the M section. If you're in a Levitt home, you know where that is. Since 1976, I am here today to speak on the infrastructure aspects of maglev train project. There are both responsible and irresponsible aspects to the project as it applies to infrastructure. I would like the city to endorse positive aspects of this testimony. First, the project is planned to go Baltimore to Washington with one stop in BWI. Information on the project shows that the length of approximately 40 miles, with an estimated cost of $10 billion with a big B. This brings the cost per mile to $250 million and does not include ongoing costs to maintain and operate the system. I am going to now look at one of the proposed paths, even though the distinguished gentleman is not committed to any, that the train can and wants to use the WB&A hiker-biker trail. And me as an engineer don't have the time to explain why they would select this. Back in 2015, the project received a license from the State of Maryland Public Service Commission to operate a train on the trail. At the last I looked was 1935 when the last train ran on that trail. The trail goes for approximately 5.5 miles, crossing the Patuxent River and ending approximately at the intersection of 450 and 703. Now let's look at the cost of the project through 5.5 miles of buoy. Based on $250 million per mile, that's $1.375 billion. Now, that is a lot of irresponsible infrastructure. What does buoy get out of that? Question mark. Loss of the trail, no stop and buoy, displaced roads and highways, and takes funding away from responsible infrastructure. Just a fraction of the $1.375 billion could be used for responsible infrastructure. Just a little parenthetic note, the state of Maryland's infrastructure budget is far less than that. Number one, example, the roadway at the intersection of 450, as you all know, and 197, going to Route 50, should be changed to 4 lanes, not just resurfaced. 2, the expanded roadway at the intersection of 450 and Racetrack Road to Route 3 should be 4 lanes, because guess what? 400 more homes are going to be going there, possibly. 3, develop the old Bowie racetrack grounds into a riverfront park and recreation for enjoyment of all citizens. 4, install a turn signal near the intersection of Route 450 and Meadow Brick Road, which is adjacent to the firehouse, because it's very dangerous to make a left-hand turn. 5, expand the roadway from the great State University of Bowie up to 495. 6, fund the development of the ongoing Amtrak Avila Liberty train, which now would go through the right-of-way, which is in Old Bowie. And guess what? It could carry passengers up to 220 miles per hour. And 7, build a bridge over the Patuxent River to connect the B&A Trail to Anne Arundel County. I want the city to support and endorse responsible infrastructure noted in items 1 through 7 of this testimony. In conclusion, I would like to quote from a plaque which hangs in the entranceway to the Glendale Community Building, which is currently on the trail. And it reads, "The White House Millennium Council designates the Millennium Trail, Washington, Baltimore, and Annapolis Trail in recognition of efforts to bring the community together to honor the past, image the future by developing a trail that connects people to their land, their history, and their culture." Thank you for this opportunity to express my opinion.
Roy Thompson. Welcome. Ms. Thompson will be followed by John Allender. Welcome, ma'am.
Hello. I can understand why Japan would like to loan the U.S. $50 billion to showcase their maglev technology in the highly visible D.C. corridor, since they have sunk at least $40 billion already into something they have not been able to sell. I cannot, however, understand why anyone in this region would think jamming this huge technology through a highly congested corridor is a good idea. Maglev works as long-haul transport between metroplexes, not through them. Maglev sells all gee whiz and Tomorrowland, but in reality the technology is over 50 years old, and maglev projects are being scuttled all around the world in favor of more flexible alternatives, like the French TGV and other high-speed rail options. Even our own Acela could travel at comparable speeds in this corridor if a dedicated fourth line was built that didn't have to compete with freight traffic for a fraction of the cost. The current rail service can get from BWI to DC in 25 minutes. The maglev would take 9. The Japanese and their lobbyists would like us to believe that we should spend $10 billion to save 15 minutes in travel time. Oh, but it's going to New York, you say. They claim it's going to New York. That's the big advantage. But where is the buy-in from the rest of the corridor? Where is the plan for developing the rest of the route? Where is the timeline for the other phases? Is it contingent on this leg being financially successful? Extending the train to New York City would take massive amounts of federal dollars, $100 billion. Where is the buy-in from the rest of the country to fund this? Without a firm commitment to extend the train beyond Baltimore or D.C., Maryland will be stuck maintaining a train to nowhere that decimates the eastern corridor for the benefit of the elite business traveler and project investors. To start this project without a solid buy-in from New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York, not to mention the country, is absurd. The comparable maglev train in China can only fill about 20% of its seats and is operating at a significant deficit because the train doesn't go where people want it to go, and the end-to-end travel time getting to the airport is comparable to taking a taxi. Things will be similar here. If I, as a Bowie resident, or any suburbanite really, wanted to take the maglev to BWI, I would need to drive a half an hour to Union Station, park, pay for parking, wait for the next train, and then pay airline prices for a 10-minute ride to BWI. I would do this exactly once, as would my co-suburbanites. Should the project go forward, it would sap funds from Amtrak's high-speed Northeast Corridor, the agency's major source of revenue for maintaining the rest of the country's less populated but indispensable routes. Building the BWI to DC line would suck up Maryland DOT capital budget for 4 years, I've heard. I think it's hard to get dollars to widen 450 and 197 now. It is not clear that this is the correct technology for the problem. There are many scholarly articles criticizing this application in our region. A recent study by a professor at the University of Pennsylvania concluded, recent maglev developments of high-speed rail have reduced the advantage of maglev in higher speeds so that the difference in travel times is small. Second, high-speed rail has a huge advantage of maglev due to its compatibility with existing rail networks. Third, high-speed rail involves lower investment costs. Operating costs on maglev are still uncertain. Energy consumption is estimated to be lower for high-speed rail. He concludes that the benefit of high-speed rail strongly outweigh maglev's small travel time advantage. He questions the soundness and direction of the federal policy of investing in maglev while neglecting high-speed rail and Amtrak. If there is money for improving rail transit, it should first go towards upgrading our existing infrastructure and enhancing commuter options in one of the most congested regions of the country, and not be used to support a Japanese enterprise desperate to demonstrate their technology by bisecting entire neighborhoods that will gain nothing from the project. I note that this is an interesting choice of technology given Trump's era's Buy America First. This preferred route will destroy hundreds, if not thousands, of homes, and they've said this is their preferred route, that yellow line. In Bowie, Glendale, Piney Orchard, Two Rivers, Linthicum, Cheverly, Odenton, among others. Eminent domain is supposed to be for the common good. This train will serve the elite traveler, the investors, and the Japanese, and as such is a clear abuse of eminent domain, in my opinion. Thank you for your time.
And after Mr. Allender, Jeff Holdridge. Welcome, sir. Good to see you again.
Yeah, it's good to see you, Council. Everything's been going so well, I haven't seen an opportunity to come up and complain about anything. But tonight, I would like to share some concerns that I have that I've learned through 39 years of working in the Defense Department on some rather large procurements and some things that we've learned that can mitigate some of the possible mistakes that we've made on many defense procurements. One is competition. Competition saves money. Competition is a requirement for procurements at every level. When we did a procurement, we had to justify exhaustively why in the world would we want to go to one source. If they've got you, they're going to charge you. If they have to compete, they're going to hold down costs. I've seen competitions in which vendors actually bid questionable prices because they wanted the job. And in some cases, because they wanted to buy in because they knew they were going to reap the benefits down the road in the operations and maintenance phase. Another thing that's really important to have more than one supplier of a technology is that it keeps down operating costs. If you only have one company that can supply materials, trains, replacement rails, replacement superconducting magnets, as time goes on, there's absolutely no way that you can avoid rising costs because you're stuck. And when you start a project, governments always, if there's a lot of money sunk, if it's a major project that is touted as a miraculous thing for the economy, as we've heard tonight, government wants to continue it. But if you have a sole source that's locked in, then candy bar the door, the prices are going up, you have no chance of holding down those costs. Another thing is, if you have a single supplier of equipment, if that supplier, for whatever reason, if the company goes out of business, or even the company finds that this wonderful project that they sold to everyone doesn't turn out to be indeed as lucrative as they thought, they're going to walk. And when they walk, we're holding the bag. We'll have no opportunity to go to another supplier to replace. So we will indeed have, as one of the maglev lines in Germany, a rusting track that carries no passengers. The problems caused by sole source procurements are immense, but to me, forcing people to give up their homes to allow elites to have time for an extra drink in an airport bar is totally unacceptable. There are instances where the good for the many outweigh the impacts on the few. The maglev project is not one of them. This project will benefit a handful of people compared to the millions who would benefit from state transportation projects that will undoubtedly be killed to pay for construction, operation, and maintenance of the SC Maglev boondoggle. Please do whatever you can to protect the citizens of Bowie, Prince George's County, and the state of Maryland from this ill-conceived project.
Thank you, John. Jeff Holder. And before Jeff starts, I want to acknowledge our county councilman, Todd Turner, has joined us tonight. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you coming by. Welcome.
Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. My name is Jeff Holdridge. I live in Martha's Choice Circle, and I've been part of the Bowie community for 17 years. The theme of my remarks is putting the cart before the horse, and to use an old transportation analogy. And by that I mean, I think that there are some premises in the planning that's gone on up to now that have become presumptions that need to be re-examined. The first premise, a lot of my friends and neighbors have already commented on, which is that there's a need for a new route between Washington and Baltimore. So I'll address the second premise. Assuming that the first premise is true, what is the basis for choosing this particular technology, the JR SC Maglev technology? I think we need to look at this with a clean slate and consider all options. So there's a lot of ways to do an express train. Express trains have been around for 100 years or more. The Amtrak Metroliner back in 1969 had a test track speed of 164 miles an hour, but they didn't have the right track. So investing in the appropriate track is very important, and as Lori said, for a fraction of the cost, the appropriate track could get the existing equipment or plan new rail equipment up to very comparable speeds. Other options that could be considered, diesel technologies. The Soviets had a diesel engine that went 168 miles an hour. The TGV goes 357 miles an hour. Maglev, there's two families of Maglev technology, the older German technology, which does 280 miles an hour, and the Japanese technology, which recently tested out at 375 miles an hour. There have been some problems with the Maglevs that have already been deployed. There was a crash in Germany. It wasn't due to the failure of the technology, it was human error. However, after that, the project was scrapped, and that was for economic reasons. In China, they have the German technology running from Shanghai to the Shanghai airport, and it's reputed to have been very costly, and it's operating in a deficit. And so one of the things that I want to question here is the assumption that this is economically viable as purely as a private investment, or whether in fact the taxpayers of the state of Maryland and the federal taxpayers are going to end up having to bail it out. And in fact, if you look at the history of the Japanese Maglev technology, there actually is a history of that. So projects that were planned that have been canceled include Germany, UK, China. The Shanghai airport line was supposed to be extended, but they decided for economic reasons to pick a different technology for the Hangzhou line. Hong Kong was considering a Maglev, but decided not to do that. And again, these are all based on very careful considerations of all of the options. So let's look at the history of the Japanese Maglev technology, which I know a little bit about from my job. They've been researching it since 1962. It took until 1997 to get a test track fully up and running, the one that is currently running. And this is something that Mr. Henley said that I'd like to take issue with, which is the statement that this is an operating system. It's a test track that's been running since 1997, and they just started extending it to turn it into the first, the Nagoya section of the actual operational train. So 1997 to 2017, what's happened in that 20 years is that the Japanese government take a careful look at the economics of this proposal, and they decided that even though they've been supporting bullet trains all from the very start, going back to 1960s, they decided that this particular proposal did not make economic sense, and so they decided not to support it. Then the company, JR Central, went ahead and started to plan without government funding. They got permission in 2007 for the current routing at an estimate cost of 5.1 trillion yen. now I guess the last estimate that was published in Japan Times was about 9 trillion yen. So that was a huge cost overrun. They originally said they were going to do it without government support, and then last year the Abe government had to, I think, bail them out. The statement that was made in the press was that they were going to need to provide some about 30% loan for the construction in order to accelerate the schedule for getting it done, but they're still saying it won't be done until 2027 for the first line and 2045 for the complete system all the way to Osaka. So I think this leaves us with a lot of questions and assumptions that need to be examined. So what technology options were considered? Did we look at the TGV? I don't think so. This is a company that has brought a technology to the state of Maryland and said, this is what we're going to build, but the state of Maryland should be looking at all the options. What were the criteria for selecting among these alternatives? What was the process that led to the selection of JRSC maglev technology? Why not the TGV? What are the expected long-term life cycle costs? What's the potential for cost overruns and who's going to pay for them? And also, a very important point, which is what are the complexities and costs associated with maintaining superconducting magnets at liquid helium temperatures? That's 4 degrees above absolute zero. You can do that in a big national lab, in a stationary facility, but I think it's a miracle of engineering that the Japanese have got this working on a test track, but in a 50-year life cycle for a working system, liquid helium magnets makes me very nervous. So also, as has been mentioned previously, what are the possible health consequences? What's the impact on electronic devices like heart pacemakers of people either nearby as the train goes by or people who are riding in the trains? And in fact, there's a lawsuit going on in Japan right now with people trying to actually get the government to revoke the permission to build the Chuo line because of concerns about health and environmental impacts. So other questions that arise from Mr. Henley's presentation include where is this Japan Bank financial feasibility report? Because I think that's a central question, is the financial feasibility of this without government support.
Thank you. My next speaker is Elizabeth Liu, and Ms. Liu will be followed by Dennis Brady. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Elizabeth Liu Vinich, and I am a Bowie citizen residing in the Rock Ledge subdivision of Bowie since 1983. Before I start my comments, I would like to thank the Bowie City Council for allowing me to speak about my concerns and fears on these unproven train projects. Such a freedom of speech is rarely allowed in the places where I was raised. And I take great pride and appreciation of being a United States citizen. Too many of us take such freedom too lightly. To begin, I bought my rancher house on Rocky Spring Land, Bowie in 1983 and have been living there ever since. Now, at that time, housing in Bowie or Princess County was affordable, and it still is. Over the years, I have had many opportunities to buy a new home and move somewhere else. But I love and enjoy my quiet, established, and tree-lined neighborhood, my nice neighbors, great city service, and easy access for all major transportation to WDC, Annapolis, Baltimore, and BWI Airport. This is the place I call home. Now, like many of my neighbors and friends, I have worked it hard, paid my bills on time, maintained my property, and tried hard to build up my nest egg. Just within the last 3 years, I have spent a lot of my saving to upgrade and maintain my home. I know many of us living in Bowie have renovated and improved our homes, as we need more living space, but we do not want to leave our wonderful neighborhoods. Now, with much surprise, we have learned that the Japanese engineered magnet train project is coming through Maryland to Washington, D.C., and with some of the suggested tracks cutting through our neighborhoods and destroying our lifestyles and our well-established communities. Like many of my neighbors, I plan to retire here and live at my house as long as I can. This unproven magnet project gives me great concern and fear that one day I'll be forced out of my house under eminent domain, lose the home equity I have built up and worked so hard for, and then have no place to go as I cannot afford the current home prices. And I also will have lost many of the valuable public services from the city of Bowie. If I sell my house now, who would pay me the fair market value knowing we are facing such a terrible situation? I'm sure many of my neighbors are facing the same problems and have similar worries. And it is also our common sentiment that even if Magnet pays us good sums of money to buy our property, we just do not want to move anywhere else. These are our homes and our sanctuaries. In addition, this magnet project is negatively affecting my local business. I have been a licensed Maryland residential real estate salesperson for past 32 years. My major market areas are in the Bowie, Glendale, Lanham, Crofton, and Odenton areas. Under the law, knowing what I know now about this forthcoming magnet project, I might have to disclose such facts to prospective clients. Granted that this project has not yet been completely firmed up, but once I disclose such facts to buyers, they would recoil from buying and owning a house in our areas. As a matter of fact, such a case had already happened in June this year. A couple came to my real estate office to sign a contract to buy a house in the Whitehall subdivision. Upon accidentally learning this project, they refused to sign the purchase agreement. They said some time ago they had to move because of the eminent domain. The federal government took over their private property in the state of New York, and they would never want to face such a horrible possibility again. Well, they refused to buy in the North Bowie area, and as a matter of fact, they said to the agent that they did not want to buy in our entire area because the state of Maryland will surely increase their property taxes to fund this project and to pay for the maintenance of the tracks in the future. Well, this couple left my office without buying any home from their agent, who is my co-worker. So you see, this magnet project has to be rejected. Otherwise, it will destroy our way of life, our homes, our community, our businesses, and yet at the same time increase our tax burdens. And this track is not even stopping for our city and our commuters. It has been said tonight that the state of Maryland is not funding anything. I and many of us would just not believe it. Okay?
We'll have to ask you to wrap up.
And we are small homeowners in the city of Bowie, in the state of Maryland, but we are real. Here, I respectfully ask the Bowie Council to thoroughly study and evaluate this project and vote a big no for it to come through our communities and through the entire state of Maryland. Thank you so much.
Thank you. After Mr. Brady, Mrs. Bruce Milam. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. It's different being on this side of the council dais than on that side, and I can't imagine what you're really going through or thinking about. So, but I do want to thank you for opening this up to citizen comment. As recently as last Thursday on your future agendas, you listed this only as a briefing, but you needed to hear from the citizens. Let me thank you for that. I want to start off by talking about communications. And I would just point out the fact that the city has a very strong and really healthy history with regards to how the citizens participate in the review process for any development. And I would suggest this should be treated the same way. If I recall correctly, when State Highways was discussing the expansion of 450 between 50 and 50 and 450, did I get that right? Expansion of 197 between 50 and 450. We had State Highways and staff contact the residents on either side of that. There were several public hearings and what have you. That hasn't been done. And I think you're seeing a room full of people here that have come because other means got the word out when in fact I think the minimum effort has been raised by the advocates for this project to get the word out, to hear from the citizens, and that's really who you need to hear. A few years ago, there was a very popular series of books called The Worst Case Scenario. So what I did was I looked at, and you know, those of you that know, 22 years in the council, the budget was the most important document we worked on. And you know, between my analytical ability and between my love of the city, I always did what was best for the citizens and best for the city. So I looked at the yellow alignment, and I identified these houses, 263 that potentially are lost due to the yellow alignment. And Mr. Henley said, well, it's too early, but in the April meeting, there was reference to the 1,000-foot wide right-of-way need, and they also talk about this sweeping angle or curve that they need the trains to run on, not sharp turns like a typical train. And ideally, the best thing for this technology would be a dead straight line between New York and between Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, because they could quickly get up to speed, maintain speed, and slow down, never have to worry about slowing for any curves. But you use sweeping curves, which is what the yellow line represents. As I said, 263 houses identified in that right-of-way potential. Worst case scenario. Going through the records, it's almost $90 million of appraised value in the city, which represents about 1.5% of your total appraised value in the city. And it results in a loss of nearly $400,000 in city tax revenue, which means you're going to have to raise taxes just to cover this component by about 0.5 cent or 3/4 cent. Take that number, multiply it by about 4, and that's how much is lost to the county. And remember, you don't get any revenue from Amtrak as it goes through. You're not going to get any revenue from this group. So there is potential calamity on the, as I said, Saddlebrook, 77 houses. Rockledge, 168. Whitehall, 18 for a total of 263. But that's not all that is affected. Bowie Golf Course, right now the yellow line, the yellow route takes holes 1 through 8. You have a nice 9-hole golf course, but in all likelihood, if this route goes through and you lose the golf course, you'll in all likelihood sell it back to the developer that wanted to put townhouses on it years ago when the city first bought it. It could impact Rockledge Elementary School. Hartfield's is right next to that alignment. And the racetrack, it comes dead over the racetrack facility. An earlier gentleman talked about how that ought to be made into a kind of a recreational and an arts mecca. Finally, it is worth noting that it runs through 2 of the original subdivisions that made up Levitt-Bowie. There's a strong history with regards to that whole process. After World War II, GI's coming home, the GI Bill opening up the ability to buy houses, and Levitt started in Levittown up in New York, and then the second one was down here. There's a major historical significance to Levitt-Bowie that you should not let this project destroy. And if they go through Rockledge and they go through Whitehall, you're going to destroy that aspect of it. You just finished a year of centennial celebration, talking about what was great for the city. And a few years ago, you celebrated the 50th anniversary of Levitt-Bowie. So there's a lot to be proud of. There's a lot to, the Mayor, you talk about how you go out and see all kinds of people on the ball fields and how that's kind of the center core of making Bowie great. How we are still a small town community. We know each other. We get along great. You let something like this come in and divide it, and you're going to start having those seeds of sowing the seeds of division that'll creep into the neighborhood. So I would strongly encourage you to consider the impact that it'll have on your revenue, your bottom line as you move forward, but also the impact it'll have on the average mom and dad, son and daughter, the people that live in the city. They're looking to you to stand up and stand firm on this. So I would encourage you to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. He'll be followed by Darrell Carrington. Welcome, sir.
We have a petition.
Oh, okay.
People opposed to the maglev project. My name is Bruce Mollum. I've lived in the Bowie area in 4 separate locations for 33 years, and since 2002 I've lived on the WB&A trail across from the golf course. I want to summarize opposition to this project and express my personal opinion. The project is bad for Bowie, bad for Prince George's County, and bad for the state of Maryland. If allowed and implemented, the maglev train will adversely affect the home and property values of Bowie. The project creates risk at numerous properties, including minor risk of eminent domain adverse possession, a hostile taking of property, and a down real estate market that wipe out a significant portion of my nest egg and the nest egg of others here. The maglev project is no benefit to the citizens of Bowie. In this information age, the plans and information about the project have not been provided or not been provided in sufficient detail to the citizens of Bowie. The scoping report does not mention the predominantly negative comments from the April Community Center meeting that we attended, nor does it include any of my specific comments or comments from the citizens of Bowie. These comments were ignored. The maglev train would be a one-of-a-kind prototype, and the effect of the magnetic electric field strong enough to lift the train. The effect on people and animals is completely unknown. The proposed project does not have a business model that closes with a ticket sales without great monetary subsidies from the federal and state government. The construction and maintenance fees must be paid from state and federal funds. Transportation infrastructure, as you all know, is a zero-sum game, where the money for maglev would take away from funds for our crumbling infrastructure, roads, bridges, airports, ports, and existing rail maintenance. Maglev will hurt our existing infrastructure. Maglev, with its limited stops, has very little benefit to the businesses in Maryland, where the task is to move people and goods within the state. The current state of the WB&A Trail, it's a tremendous asset to the city of Bowie and a big plus for the homeowners living nearby. Several thousand people enjoy the trail each year. Children learn to ride bikes there. They hear an owl for the first time. They watch herons and horsepen branch. They watch deer, see hawks, and watch bald eagles fly. The last train on the WB&A Trail was in 1935. That's 82 years ago. This sliver of land has been used for recreation for 4 generations. Even before it was paved, people hiked on this trail, rode their bikes, horses, for 4 generations. The maglev train would be like a linear trash dump through our city, completely out of character with the extensive tree canopy in Bowie. The maglev train makes no sense for our transportation infrastructure, the nature, the environment, our farms, our real estate values in the city of Bowie. It would affect or displace thousands. Those opposed to the project, please stand up. Thank you. To the mayor, the council, and those watching at home, let's fight to protect the WB&A Trail and the surrounding homes, the crown jewel of Bowie, our home, the place we love. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Darrell Carrington. Following Mr. Carrington will be Catherine Levitt. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, honorable members of the council. Appreciate the opportunity to get to address you this evening on this very important topic. I will not reiterate all of the very, very good points made by the speakers before me. I think this briefing that you received from the citizens of Bowie, those that live in the unincorporated areas, has been far more detailed than the presentation, unfortunately, that was given to us. I appreciate Mr. Henley being here. That was of no disrespect to Mr. Henley. I do appreciate him being here and his presentation. I realize how difficult this, could be for him. However, I think it is disrespectful to us that all of the stakeholders that are proposing this project are not here. It is obvious that we care very much about this. I mean, I know the hour has gotten late, but this is important, so we're going to stay here and we're going to talk about this so that everyone is heard and so that you know how passionately we believe that this community is someplace that I've only lived in, well, I guess I've lived in my house now for 16 years. I just celebrated the closing of my house 16 years ago, 2 weeks ago. I came to this community because it was stable. I knew that it wasn't going to have all kinds of radical changes. My neighbors had already lived in their homes for 20 plus years and more. I'm one of the new kids on the block at 16 years in my community. I live on Hillmead Road right down the street from the horse barn, the Purple Barn, and we're very proud to have that there. We're very proud to have the Bowie Golf Course, and I can actually play holes 1 through 8. So, this is scary for me to lose the holes there that I can actually make a par on. But I believe that this community should stay stable, and the houses that you'll be taking out are those folks that have been here since Levitt homes and the like, and I know that you don't want to see the character of this community change so dramatically, so very quickly, and it's not just the areas that they're proposing for the lines. This is going to be a major impact for us for traffic. I mean, they're going to have to bring in equipment all over this area to be able to build this project. So it's not just an inconvenience to you who are losing your house, but if you live adjacent, you are going to be impacted. When eminent domain is for the public good, we can sometimes understand it, and it makes sense. This project makes no sense whatsoever. Whatsoever. So, I implore you, listen to your citizens, your voters, as the election for 2018 is coming up. We are paying attention. Thank you for your time.
And Ms. Levitt will be followed by Robert Bungie. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm Catherine Levitt. I've lived in the M section since 2003, and I, like the other gentleman, am a new kid on the block. I take the MARC train every day, and I want to point out to you, in case you didn't know, that we already have rail service between Washington and Baltimore 7 days a week, 18 hours a day, Monday through Friday, and 12 or 15 hours on Saturday and Sunday. It's pretty cheap, and it takes less than an hour to get in either direction. So, in addition, it also serves all of the communities in between, not just Union Station, BWI, and Penn Station. So the idea that this will decrease emissions is laughable, and you may have heard us laughing because, as everybody else has said, it doesn't stop here. I would have to drive to BWI and take the train into Union Station every day. I would have to drive 20 miles instead of 3.5. How's that saving anybody emissions? So, by the way, that doesn't run on a profit. My personal ticket from Bowie to DC is $162 a month, and $120 of that is subsidized by my employer. So, in summary, I would like to tell you, not only do I not want this running through Bowie, but the Washington to Baltimore area is the wrong study area for Phase 1.
Robert Bungie. Is Robert here? Okay. Edward Wasaki? Oh, there you are. I thought never. Bear with me. You sit back there thinking about your kids graduating from high school, and you didn't hear your name.
That and many other things, Mr. Mayor, yep.
Thanks for coming.
It's been a while. Mr. Mayor, esteemed council members, Robert Bungie, I live in the A section, for the record. Fred, I'm probably going to channel Bill Alshire. You remember Bill, I know Dennis remembers Bill. Throughout history, economic prosperity has followed leaps in transportation. From railroads to interstate highways to jet planes, countries with world-class transportation systems have more prosperity, more and better jobs, better higher standards of living. At the start of the 20th century, talked about tonight, Bowie was at the apex of a state-of-the-art high-speed transportation system in the form of the electric-powered Washington, Baltimore, and Annapolis Railroad. In 1915, it buzzed through Bowie, did not stop, but zipped through Bowie at an amazing 60 miles an hour. You know why that was important then, and why? It went away in 1935 during the Depression. It was important then because in 1917, when we entered World War I, and there was a need to bring 1 million men into the Army very, very quickly, the Army chose the location of what is today Fort Meade because of the intersection of the WB&A and the NEC, the old Pennsylvania rail lines, which was also a state-of-the-art transportation system starting in the mid-1930s when they electrified it. I've got to also point out, Amtrak does not stop in Bowie. MARC does, but it's a state-subsidized system. Amtrak is a federally subsidized passenger system, but it does not stop in Bowie. It zips right through Bowie as well. If you look at the logo behind you, Bowie's got a long history of supporting state-of-the-art, high-speed rail transportation systems. Obviously, you've heard a lot of opposition. There will be a lot of opposition. I'm not entirely sold. The project has to be really open, and I'm not sure that they're being open. There's just a small handful of passenger transportation systems in the entire world are profitable. I don't necessarily buy it when somebody says that this one would be. I'm not sure because history is really, and experience is really against them. Amtrak will never make any money. MARC will never make a profit. So I hear very loudly the hues and cries here that the Maryland may end up supporting this. But I have to step back and ask you guys and ask our state representatives and our county representatives to at least keep an open mind. You know what? Even if even if this project fails, we've heard a lot about TVG. Actually, Amtrak's next generation of rail system is TVG. But I'd like to see if everyone is so diehard, say that's so good and such a good option, I'd like to see the city of Bowie step out as a leader, support that. And maglev, or high-speed rail transportation of any sort, really, offers a glimmer of hope to further increase the creation of regional and jobs and perhaps the major development of Baltimore, the city of Baltimore, into a job creation machine that our children and grandchildren may be able to utilize. If we want to keep Bowie a thriving city and a place where our children want to stay, we need to have access to jobs. And jobs have always followed this type or this scale of transportation change and technology. It's true. You can disagree with me. I know I'm in a hostile crowd, but it's true. Okay. So I'm just afraid if we close the door on the project now, even before real data and details are understood, and I turn around and I look at the project, and I'm really annoyed, thank you, the state representatives, as to why the state is not here to talk details as far as the routing is concerned. But if we fail in the shadow of our forefathers who saw the value of the next great transportation system, be it rail or the highways. You know, land was taken for the interstate highways.
All right,
That's
I asked you to
all.
wrap up.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Edward Wysocki, welcome, sir. And he'll be followed by Linda Tucker. Good to see you, sir.
My name's Edward Wysocki. I've been a Bowie resident for 25 years, and I live on Rocky Spring Lane. A lot of the previous speakers have brought up some very good points, but let's talk about how this is going to be funded after it's running. There are 40,000 daily riders on MARC. Probably 30,000 of them are taking Baltimore to Washington. So you've got 30,000 people. And 30,000 people, even if you got them all to go from MARC to maglev, would not pay for maglev. It would not pay to keep it running. It would not keep it maintained. It would be a boondoggle, which it is. And the bottom line is, there are not enough people taking the train between these two cities to make this economically viable. They want to go all the way up to New York. Well, that's going to cost a lot of money. And in the New York Times last Friday, the new tunnel under the Hudson River is going to cost $11 billion. So you're talking big bucks, and to tell you the truth, if you want to go from Washington to New York, you're talking probably $100 billion to $150 billion. And I don't know who is going to come up with that money, and I don't know why we need it when we have Amtrak, we have highways, and this makes absolutely no sense for the people of Bowie, the people of Prince George's County, and the people of Anne Arundel County and Odenton. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Linda Tucker. And Ms. Tucker will be followed by Joan Glenn. Welcome, ma'am. Thank you.
Good evening. Many of my colleagues have already addressed specific concerns. However, I am very confused by this overall project. Mr. Henley, you referenced the 2001-2003 maglev development project. The technology is still the same. The only difference is the vendor. The German Transrapid system withdrew from the project, claiming maglev technology was too unreliable and too inflexible for modern cities. Yet here you are, Mr. Henley, presenting the same technology 15 years later with no improvements. And I must reiterate, the Japanese maglev is currently not a commercially viable system. It's still in the testing phase at a cost currently of $90 billion. That's a 9 and a 0. And they're not even operational yet. This amount does not include the annual maintenance, which according to the Chinese government, who do have a functioning system, is $1.1 million per year per mile. Do the math, over 40 miles, that's $44 million a year just to maintain the system. And neither the Chinese nor the Japanese trains have been tested in the weather that is unique to the northeast of the United States. There's no snow, no ice, no hurricanes, and we do have an occasional tornado. Still not tested. It's still in the testing phase. Mr. Hanley, your website talks about a May 2017 final scoping report. This perplexes me. Your presentation claims tonight that you're still in the preliminary phases. So why do you have a report that's listed as final on your website? In the 270 pages, there are a few items that raised flags for me. One, page 23. Agency scoping process and comments. You provided a list of agencies invited to participate in the project. Conspicuously missing from your invitation were Anne Arundel County, Prince George's County, the Washington, D.C. City Council, the Bowie City Council, and every municipality from D.C. through to Baltimore. You met twice. With 30 different agencies as part of a NEPA process, which you just claimed you had nothing to do with, and you met with them, but no elected officials were involved in that process. Several agencies wrote in comments towards your website, and I will say, the Army Corps of Engineers, the project will likely result in discharges of dredge and fill materials into the waters of the United States, specifically the Chesapeake Bay. Governor Hogan just announced $3 billion investment into the bay, which this train will destroy. The Environmental Protection Agency states that they need to address potential direct, indirect, and cumulative impacts on species, endangered, threatened, invasive, bat species, hazardous waste, and children's health are just to name a few on their list. Amtrak According to Amtrak, significant public and private investments have already been used, secured, or planned to improve the existing infrastructure. Amtrak's concerned that the environmental consequences of a new technology are not fully known at this point. Prince George's County is extremely concerned that this project will take people speeding through Prince George's County, literally and figuratively, bypassing our communities, our parks and rec, and we will get nothing out of it. We are more than just a bypass system for a bigger project. Throughout your website, and specifically in your scoping report, you talk about addressing questions and concerns about this problem. However, I can't locate any of your responses that have already been submitted. Where can the public find out what the truth is? And there's some interesting little factoids I'd like to tell you guys about. JR Central, doing business as Texas Central, sued the Texas landowners that sought court orders allowing the company to access private property to survey land for this similar project. That lawsuit was dropped when they realized that in the United States, private property is private property. Currently, JR Central is being sued by 740 residents of Tokyo claiming to stop this train, complaining that the complaint is that that the approval of the building plan was illegal, that they falsified the environmental review, and they did not discuss issues of underground waterways and the volume of earth that's excavated, how it will impact the surrounding structures.
Okay, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up.
This country has already bailed out the banking industry and the auto industry. We don't need to bail out Magnif left. And on my final note, in closing, this project reminds me of two other transportation marvels of their times. On May 6, 1937, at the Naval Air Station in Landhurst, New Jersey, the marvel of transcontinental travel, the Hindenburg, crashed and burned, literally, killing 36 people. The unsinkable ship sank on April 15, 1912, the Titanic on its maiden voyage, and estimated 1,500 people died. I hope we stop this train to nowhere before we invest any more of our precious resources.
John Glenn. Come on, folks, let's let your neighbors have an opportunity to speak tonight. I know you feel very strongly this, but I would like to give everybody an opportunity to speak.
I'm Joan Glenn. I'm a resident of Saddlebrook West, and I've been a resident of Bowie for 23 years. I don't know how I follow that. But I had a number of things I was going to say, but I think a lot of them have already been said, so I want to focus on a couple things. One, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Mayor, and the Bowie City Council for being here tonight, for hearing us, for letting us see this presentation, hearing from us, because we have not had the opportunity to comment on this project. My home backs to the WB&A trail. I have received nothing from MTA. I heard about this project from a neighbor who heard about it from somebody else. And I would bet that a great number of the people in this room have heard about this project in a similar manner. And I say this, my background is actually in preparing environmental impact statements under the National Environmental Policy Act. It's what I do for a living. The gentleman here said that MTA was, quote, taking their time so that they could get it right. If this is getting it right, I would hate to see how they get it wrong. We have been given no information on this project. The scoping, one of the very first speakers asked if the scoping report was final. That is a final document, and it has been accepted by MTA. However, we were not notified during that scoping period. We were not given the opportunity to comment. And so I will be writing MTA and requesting that they reopen the scoping period on this project. We've done it. And I request that everyone else here make that request as well. When this project is done, MTA is going to have a hard time in court if they have not listened to the people and opened the scoping project. Just two other notes. Again, I think a lot has been said about the WB&A Trail and the wonderful asset that it is to our community. The gentleman here tonight said there was a synergy between having a high-speed rail and a bike trail. That is a beautiful greenway, a beautiful, peaceful place for all of us to utilize. There is no synergy there. And then lastly, The idea that this project is somehow to benefit Maryland and to get people from D.C. to Baltimore is a joke. This project is to get people from D.C. to New York. And the mayor of New York will be thrilled. He will be thrilled that Maryland helps foot the bill to get the initial leg of this project built, because there is no way it's getting to New York until it comes through Maryland. So, we are just a little cog in the wheel of getting that greater project done. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate your comment. Bob Ross? Bob Ross? Is Mr. Ross here? Okay. Terry O'Neill? Oh, you Bob Ross? I'm sorry. Welcome, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Bob Ross, and I'm president of the Prince George's County NAACP. And some of our members that live in Bowie requested that I come down and testify. In fair disclosure, I worked on the railroad for over 35 years. I was a manager. I worked on the Cellar project. So we have great concerns about this. I don't have enough knowledge right now of the situation, but we will be looking into it and supporting the residents in opposing the high maglev to come through. Even though I like the maglev, but it has some challenges that wouldn't be fair to the community, particularly when it impacts historical properties, particularly African Americans. We need to look at it very, very carefully. One lady said earlier that this may be the wrong test area, and that seemed like what it is. There's other areas along the Northeast Corridor that would be better fitted for it. For example, you have about Princeton Junction. We have a track there that can do up to 300 miles an hour. So maybe they need to look at another area rather than the state of Maryland. But at that point, we'll be talking to the residents. We'll probably be inviting MTA to come out and present to our organization to find out exactly what's going on. And thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your comment. Terry O'Neill. Welcome, sir. Mr. O'Neill will be followed by Mrs. Dixon. Welcome.
I've been a Bowie resident for 38 years. I live in Rockledge. The first we found out about this, we've been on an extended camping vacation. We got back, there was a letter in my mailbox. Wow. It was quite a shock. I've been trying to find out information. I had no prepared speech for this evening or anything like that. I just had a bunch of questions, just trying to figure out how it's going to affect me locally. I can tell that the questions can't be answered in this venue, so I guess I'll be saving them for a later time. But it is a shock to the system to see what goes on. I hate to be negative and say behind my back, but we had no idea. Very little information.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Dixon? Who just signed in as Mrs. Dixon? Welcome, sir.
I'm a kind of new kid on the block also, but I'd like to say to the gentleman here, normally I would feel sorry for somebody, but that's what you got paid for, to be thrown under the bus. That's where they put you. My question to everybody is, we've talked about this, we've been through this and many other subjects. We have spoken. Can you hear us now? The other thing is, if you can, what are you going to do about it? Because we're here, we do this over and over again, and we don't get any results. Everything is done, it seems like behind our back. We see how important they thought we were. They didn't even show up. So it's simple. It's Washington Post. If you don't get it, you don't get it. I'm done.
Thank you. The next sign, it's Stacy. I apologize. I can't read your last name. Stacy from Dewberry Street. Oh, welcome.
Hello, my name is Stacy Hawkins, and I live in the Glendale area, right off of Bell Station Road.
and am represented by Senator Peters and Delegate Turner, so I'm happy to see them here this evening and appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all. I was heartsick and devastated when I heard about this train coming through. I live right off of Bell Station Road, and I too have talked to a number of people on Bell Station Road who were not notified, didn't know that this was happening in their backyard. Our BW trail is constantly used, thousands of people on that trail, and it is also part of the historic district. That whole historic district area over there is designated as a historic site. We have Marietta Mansion is over there, the Glendale Hospital site, the Plan Introduction Station, all of that is in the historic district, a designated historic district. Not to mention the environmental impact, which apparently has not been mentioned this evening, which I am very disappointed to hear about because that is such an important part of this, not only the environment being destroyed, but the environment of the people being destroyed. When you see that one picture of 263 houses, 263 families, and when you see just a small part, that was just a small part of this whole 40-mile swath that's going to take care of this. We are talking about real people and real lives, and I can say with confidence that I'm sure Mr. Henley does not live along any of those paths that have been delegated for this. I've lived in this area since 1982, and I've lived here for a reason, history and historic preservation, my life, and this area, beautiful bucolic area, and once it's gone, it's gone. You cannot take back the destruction that is going to be wreaked on this area. You know, Prince George's County, their mainstay is quality of life, the quality of life in Prince George's County. Come to Prince George's County, have a quality of life. What kind of quality of life do you use for that definition? Now, I'm just so upset about this that I just have to say I truly, truly want you to stop this project. I just can't even imagine the devastation that it will wreak. The trail along the Purple Barn area, we pass that every day. We see that area. The agricultural area, the University of Maryland agricultural area will be affected. And do you know the agricultural area was the reason that Glendale and Bowie even exist in this area? And the other thing that will be affected is the Patuxent Wildlife Refuge, miles and miles of refuge. So just remember that none of this can be put back. Once it is taken away, it can never be put back. So I would just like to close to say that once this devastation occurs, not only in the houses and the people and lives that you destroy, but it'll take 10 to 30 years to even get back half of the beauty of this area that we now have. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's Ann Pierre. Pierre? Welcome, sir.
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I won't go over the things that the previous speakers have said, but I'd just like to also thank Mr. Henley for the presentation that he made. I'd like to talk about some of the things that I didn't hear. I heard that, as Mr. Henley pointed out rightly, that this is a regional project, but I didn't hear a statement of commitment from New York and Pennsylvania and New Jersey that they were going to support this project with money and resources. I heard that the Japanese construction company that's going to build this project is going to make out well, and the investors who are backing them are going to make out well, but I didn't hear from Mr. Henley what's in it for Bowie. And another thing which was interesting to me when Mr. Henley talked about the project and how we're going to move people and keep people off the roads and all of that, I didn't hear what a ticket would cost on this train. Members of the council, this project was not the result of a careful analysis of transportation needs for our region. This project was the result of political connections and who you know. This is a textbook example of private pigs feeding at the public trough. And in the end, you see the company, the construction company and their backers, including Mr. Henley's company, they all make the money on the build. Once we say yes, they're done. They're whole, right? And they don't give a damn whether or not the second part of the project goes through. They make their money, they laugh all the way home. So here's what I see. I see that we say yes, Bowie is devastated. These guys make their money. It's not a proper project that's been pointed out. And the taxpayers of Bowie are left holding the bag for this white elephant. And that in the meantime, the city of Bowie, our homes, bear the brunt of political cronyism. This is a bad idea, it's a bad project, and I hope for sure that you'll say no.
Thank you. Fiona Moody, and she'll be followed by John Kabbalah, who will conclude the speakers. Welcome, ma'am.
Good evening. One thing I'd like to note for all the residents and the representatives here is that this project is privately funded, and that means the money is there ready, waiting to go. Once approved, construction will begin, and it's incredibly important that we as a community remain vigilant. We must continue to show up for meetings, write our representatives, and band together as a community if we wish to stop the bulldozers encroaching. Senator Peters mentioned in his comments at the beginning that his opinions and the opinions of our representatives will be crafted based on the views that we express at this meeting and those going forward. I implore all of our representatives to listen and keep that promise. Keep an open ear as you listen to your constituents. You represent us. One of the 4 routes that the developers are looking at cuts directly through the Rockledge neighborhood, a 1,000-foot corridor taking out as many as 263 homes by eminent domain. This is not only unacceptable, it is a violation of private property rights and an abuse of government power. Bowie citizens are sick and tired of being told what we want and why we want it. This project will provide neither commercial nor economic benefits for the city of Bowie and will do more harm than good. Make no mistake, this project will irreparably damage our community. Frankly, I am not interested in the empty promises of offered potential jobs that this will bring Bowie or the potential for cleaner environment when air and road traffic is potentially decreased. I'm concerned about protecting the integrity of my home and my community. I'm concerned about maintaining my neighbor's quality of life. And I'm concerned about preserving historic sites and green spaces throughout the city of Bowie. The maglev will destroy all of those things. This is a for-profit project, and that above everything else is the developer's concern. Bowie residents are clear on this issue. We do not want it. We do not need it. No to the maglev train. Thank you.
John Kabbalah? You're up next. You're up next. Okay. John, welcome, sir. Good to see you.
Mayor, council members, thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak about this project. First, as you can tell, we're not stupid. We can't be fooled by the project team members. Who will benefit from this? It's going to be the very few wealthy people who want to fly back and forth, essentially fly on a train instead of a plane from DC.
Mr. Kabbalah, I appreciate it if you kind of speak to us.
Okay. So it's going to benefit the few wealthy folks. It's not going to benefit anybody who lives in Bowie, like you've heard, anybody in Prince George's County. As a matter of fact, it's going to harm most of the folks that live in and around the train. Like you've heard from everybody, nobody's going to commute out of the way to jump on the train to go to Baltimore. We need projects that support us for our daily commutes, make our daily lives better. We need good roads. We need a metro to be fixed. We can't afford, and nobody's funding those projects and the infrastructure properly right now. I don't know how we're going to continue to fund something as expensive as this project is. I also believe that some of the claims that are made are, I don't want to necessarily say false, but misleading. Air quality improvements, road traffic improvements. Traffic is not going to improve. Traffic is caused by people driving to and from work. Nobody's going to take this train to drive to work. It's not going to happen. So it's not going to help with traffic at all. Regarding being up in front, honest about the project, why did they choose between Thanksgiving and Christmas to do the public scoping period? Yes. What? I used to be a program manager for NEPA, for the Air Force at the Pentagon, so I know a little bit about the process. That was a major failure. Worst time of the year to do public scoping, and that was deliberate. I mean, bottom line is, we do need improved infrastructure. We do need improved transportation options to get back and forth to work, not to get to New York. Who works in New York on a daily basis? We need Metro to get fixed. We need to be safer, more efficient, and also less expensive. We need the roads and the infrastructure we already have to be fixed. We already have the MARC train, like people have said. We have options. They just need to be improved. That's all I need to say. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the people I have signed up to speak. What I'll do now is I'm just going to go down the council row and let council have a brief series of questions. Understand, after we're finished, council will, we're not here making a decision on this tonight because we still have other people we have to talk to. But what we want to do is go through things, see if we have some questions of the proposer. If you want, they may give you direct questions or something. We'll go from there. Mrs. Blank, I'm going to start with the two people that represent District 2 and District 1. Mrs. Blangan and then Mr. Esteve.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate everybody coming out tonight. I really feel your pain and what you're going through. Mr. Henley, I'm afraid that my questions won't be able to be answered right now, but so you don't have to get up. But I'm 5 generations in Bowie. My parents came here in 1962. I'm here. My children are here. My grandchildren are here. Now my great-grandchildren are here. So obviously I have some deep roots in Bowie. I'm concerned that 263 homes will be lost by eminent domain. I'd really rather see this money go to improving our streets and improving our infrastructure, our roads, our bridges. We had some very good suggestions in this report that was given to us. I truly don't see what's in it for Bowie. But one of the things that bother me almost as much as losing all these homes to eminent domain is how far-reaching the magnetic field is. We don't know not only what it's going to do to animals. I know I'm not the only person in this room with a pacemaker. How many of you can't go near your microwave? So this is very dangerous, and it can be very wide and very broad-reaching, and I'm very concerned about that. I don't want to move from Bowie because I'll die if I stay. So that truly bothers me. And I think the last thing that really bothers me is from the report and the things I read, it almost sounds like it's a done deal. So that's if you can take my questions back and have them answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Esteve and then Mr. Marcos.
Hey, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, everyone, for coming out tonight. I know people heard about this through different avenues. I know several of us in the City Council worked to try to get the word out in different ways. But I really just want to say a quick word of thanks to a group of volunteers who've been out there in their own time in really, really hot weather, knocking on doors and letting people know about this, especially in the Rockledge section in Huntington. And several of you are in the room, you know who you are. Thank you for your work, because this really, the opposition to this has really been led by the community, and that I think speaks very, very highly of our city. So thank you to those who've been really active getting people informed. I have a couple questions, Mr. Henley, that you may or may not be able to answer at this time. The first, we've heard a lot of different things about the time frame for this project. I had a conversation with someone in the governor's office a few weeks ago, and they told me that this project has a 50% chance of happening, and that if it does, it won't be for another 10 to 20 years. I've heard from others very different, ideas about what we're looking at, whether this is early as 2019 or whether this is 20 years out. Do you have any comment about the time frame on what we're looking on this?
Well, assuming the EIS proceeds on its schedule, we have a record of decision scheduled. The NEPA team has a EIS record of decision scheduled for February 2019. Based on that schedule, most optimistic outcome would be we'd be in design and construction by the end of that year, so 2019 start. Depending on the alignment selected, depending on the construction approach, depending on a lot of things, will dictate the duration, but 5 to 7 years is sort of the most generous sort of outcome. Depending on how long that construction is, then be followed by approximately 2 years of testing, commissioning, acceptance, all that kind of activity.
Gotcha. All right. So potentially 5 to 7 years, potentially sooner. You said a decision is likely being made in February 2019 should things go well. Can you describe for me exactly who the decision makers are in that process?
Sure. There's a whole slew of federal agencies, the EPA, the Army Corps of Engineers, various state agencies that are participating in the process. All of those comments and concerns that have to be mitigated go through them, and then ultimately to the FRA, the actual final signature, the issuer of the record of decision is the FRA, Federal Railroad Administration.
Gotcha. I just want to let folks in the room know a lot of the influencers in this project are going to be our state elected officials, but also our federal elected officials and the governor. The governor ultimately was the one who requested the federal funds for the study process. If you've signed up with my email list, you're going to get a list that I sent out weeks ago of every single elected official you have, non-judicial, federal on down. So sign up if you want to get that, and you can start calling some folks tomorrow if you want. Remind them there is an election coming up. As far as public input, we have more meetings coming up. My only two real kind of concerns, among many, two of the big ones that sort of stand out of the project in general. I echo the concerns of a lot of folks who've pointed out that, a lot of other similar projects abroad, and even just high-speed rail projects in the United States in general have a habit of going way over budget, not delivering anywhere near the level of service that's promised, and not recuperating the funds that are expected to be made back. I'm very, very, very skeptical that the private investments coming out of Japan are going to get recuperated. And just speaking for me, I feel very strongly that the likelihood of us ending up having to subsidize this in the long term is a real serious likelihood, and that really concerns me. The only other thing, and this is just a very general comment, the problem with maglev technology in general is that it's so much more money for only a marginal improvement in speed. And a lot of folks have brought it up, and by the way, I just want to comment, I love the fact that Bowie has so many federally employed engineers. Like, this is the worst community to go to war with if you're a developer. And I just want to say, and I apologize, I'm a little hoarse tonight, I got some bronchitis, but to all the folks who came out and gave really solidly well-researched presentations, thank you. Of course, you were all wearing ties and the short-sleeve work shirts, so we can recognize you from a distance, and we appreciate you, and thank you for all your comments tonight, and they were very well-informed. But I'm very skeptical about this project. Obviously, I mean, I represent the district where 4 of the proposed 6 routes are cutting through, so I think my opinions on this are well-established. And I would just urge our state elected officials are here and the county officials and my colleagues to continue to reach out to our friends at the state and federal level to voice our displeasure with this. We're not going to see the return on investment that people are promising. It's going to hurt our community. It's not going to benefit us. I mean, in my private work, I've worked for a lot of rich people. Most of the millionaires I know aren't spending this much money to go between D.C. and New York, or let alone Baltimore and D.C., okay? The thing about millionaires is they tend to be cheapskates. So I don't see that happening. I'm very, very skeptical about this overall, and I would just encourage folks in the room to continue to voice your opposition, but really focus on your federal and your state folks, because they're the big decision makers that need to be reached out to. So thanks again for coming out tonight. And Mr. Hamley, we do appreciate your time. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for being with us. So we know it's a long night, but we thank you for being a part of this process, one way or the other. I'm sure it has.
Thank you, Mr. Marcos. And then Mr. Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much for being here tonight. I'm sure it wasn't easy for you. I think you've heard our citizens and how Bowie feels about this, and I'd have to agree. I agree with them, and I agree with my colleagues. There's just no benefit to us in this. And I truly believe that the economic stability of Bowie would definitely be damaged by taking that many homes and that swath of land away. We're kind of fragile right now with the aging centers that we have in the city of Bowie. And we've been trying to work on that for years, and I think if you remove that many families from here, it would definitely hurt us. So that's all I got to say, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Because of the hour, I'm going to keep this very brief. And I want to start really, Mr. Henley, I really want to thank you for coming out this evening. And typically, we are a very kind and welcoming community, okay? Just want to say that for starters.
We are a kind and welcoming community.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are, Mr. Mayor. You know, as I said, I'm going to keep it very brief. And I am going to tell you that I have studied quite a bit about the program and your facilities, and I've looked abroad and all the different nations and where in China and Japan and all where you have this in a test phase. And I just going to say, for the record, and just as I said, keeping it very brief, I want to echo much of what my colleague Mike Stev, Diane Palangan, and Jimmy Marcos has said this evening, as well as all of the residents of Bowie who came up and spoke against this project tonight. I always pride myself in being the voice of the people and following what the people ask for. I must say I'm going to join the people and again and against this project completely. Tonight, you were just here giving a presentation. We weren't making any decisions, but it's good to have this sort of information, and I thank you for sharing this with the community and ourselves. And as Councilwoman Palangan said, it does look as bit that this train has left the station, okay? But no pun intended, but you know, we're going to work together as a community to prevent this from the first shovel going into the ground to develop this project. And again, as I said, I'm going to keep it brief because of the hour. I want to thank all of the residents who came out tonight and spoke, and those who encourage others to speak. And we have to be involved. We have to remain involved, and it's important that we do. And again, Mr. Henley, under different circumstances, we will be much more welcoming. But I just wanted to say, again, thank you for coming out, and again, thank you, residents.
Thank you. Ms. Klaus, and then Dr. Trout.
Good evening. First, I would like to say thank you to all the residents who have come out. You came out in full force. You came out prepared. This document that was generated for us was more informative than some of the other materials I've received, which I found exceptional. You all have come to us many times, and we haven't seen eye to eye on every project, but we hear you. The fact that every person in this room stood up against this project coming to Bowie or coming through Bowie said everything. And the fact that the overflow rooms are filled and such wonderful speakers came up and presented a great presentation. I mean, this is a great presentation from you, from the community, and what you all want and why you want it the way you want it. I will say, and I'm going to keep this brief because I have to be on the operating table in about 12 hours and I need to get home. So, and it's been a long night. But I think we must listen at this point to the will of the residents. I'm concerned about the environmental impact. Part of the reason all of us love Bowie are the parks, is the open green space, the fact that this can potentially have unknown health impacts to our residents, the number of residents that could potentially be displaced and lose their homes, and also the price tag just seems over and beyond for this economic environment. So I really don't see the benefit for our residents in the city of Bowie. You all have made your voices known, and we agree with you. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I want to thank all the residents for coming out and speaking. Thank you, Mr. Henley, for giving us your portion of it. It's unfortunate that we couldn't get the rest of the federal contention. The team. Well, yeah, I can't consider them a team, Mayor, because a team means you're working together.
No, their team.
Well, I don't see them working together. Okay. That's my point. I mean, they're not here, so I can't consider them a team. You know. So I'll just say thank you for showing, because the rest of the folks, I can't say anything to them that's worth repeating right here, because we're in good ears company, so we can't say a lot of things that we want to say. But I do want to mention that, let's go back to Councilmember Palangan. Several council meetings when this came up, and I mentioned that I had concerns. And I didn't want to single out any particular person on the council, because I know, that Councilwoman Palangan has a medical device in there. So for the last month, I've been looking through all the literature. I've Googled, I've been on everything, looking for all the literature, because here again, I know that you have RF frequency, because like I said, I've been looking through all the literature. I know what you got, and I know how the system works. And there's also a reverse in the system as I was reading along. But the thing of it is, I haven't seen anything which makes me feel comfortable that this doesn't have negative effects on people that have devices, health devices, and also what is this going to do to any of the other apparatus, because all smart devices are controlled by radio frequencies. Let's be specific on that. So I haven't seen anything that tells me that you have a safe product. And if you don't have a safe product, and I don't see that you have a safe product, then you don't need to be in Bowie. That's one. And number two, you aren't doing anything for Bowie, because none of the benefits on this system is going to be received by anybody who lives in Bowie, because there is no stop for anybody in Bowie to use it. Environment. We must look at the environment. And we got to look at the environment from a couple of different perspectives. We have to look at it as, and I can hear former Mayor Gary Allen saying, what about the green spaces? We need to look at that. Then we need to look at it just from the environmental aspects, that Bowie is the #1 sustainable community in the state of Maryland. I'm going to repeat that. The city of Bowie is the #1 municipality, the #1 community, the #1 city in the state of Maryland. Of the 157 municipalities, it is ranked #1 as far as sustainability is concerned and has been recognized on that here recently. So we don't need to do anything that's going to bring us down. We need to do things that's going to improve us. We need to do things that improve our residents. We need to do things that's going to improve us as a city. I don't see any of these benefits coming here. So what we need to do is, residents, we need to lobby our state officials, we need to lobby our federal officials, we need to lobby our county officials. And let me tell you, it does work. Because we lobbied our state officials in District 4, and we told our state officials, okay, we want money in your budget to repave Central Avenue. And we said, we don't want the money in the budget that you're going to take care of it after the summer. We want the road paved before the summer. Because we know once the summer is gone, you have the weather. And they're not going to do any road pavements in November and December. We know how the game is played. And so what we had to do was come together as a people. And that's what we did. And that's the reason why that road got paved before the summer got started. Had we not have done that, it would not have been paved. That's the reason why you saw a change and you saw improvements on Mount Oak Road with CSS. Because we got Councilmember Todd Turner to work with us, to work with a congressman to make sure that happened. So residents, I'm telling you, you gotta lobby them. Because I'm the pain that nobody wants to get rid of. Because I'm gonna be a pain and I've been a pain, and that's the way it's gonna be. And if you don't make yourself a nuisance, then they're gonna walk all over you. I'm telling you, you're not gonna get what you want if you don't make yourself a nuisance. So I'm done.
Before I wrap up, I know this has not been a pleasant experience for you, but would you like to make a closing comment?
Well, I certainly did not know what to expect this evening would result in. I'm extremely impressed and just the emotions that went through me as I heard people speaking so compellingly about their lives and their homes and their expectations and how dim the future looks. I take that to heart. And believe me, your comments about the process not working and not being heard and comments being dismissed or ignored and not reflected, that is going to be something I'm going to take up tomorrow right away to make sure that that gets fixed. Okay. All I can promise is that this process will be more fair. I've heard your comments, I've heard your emotions, I've heard your good ideas, well delivered, sometimes tough to hear, but I take it very, very respectfully. I have a lot of respect for Bowie, more so tonight than ever. This is, Bowie Strong is Maryland, Maryland has a lot to be proud of, and it's people like you that have come out and spoken so intelligently and so convincingly that I would like to be able to respond to every single comment that was made. I got pages. It would be a disservice to do short shrift to the responses, though. Some of the comments that were made were just not right. They were inaccurate, but that's fair. We need to clear that up for you. So to the best of my ability, Mayor, I will try to put together a summary of the comments and our answers to them and get them back through, I guess, Al.
Yes.
Fair. And we should do this again. I know, you want to hear that I can't tell you what the alignment's going to be. That has not been decided. This is going to help shape the response and the alignment choice. I guarantee you that. Okay, but other than that, I'd be doing a disservice to you, and I'd be lying if I said I could give you anything more than that, because I'm not in control of that process. Okay, but I have heard you, and I respect you, and hopefully we can come out of this and have something that's acceptable for everybody, including Bowie.
Okay. Right. Thank you. Excuse me. Come on. Let's continue the civility. Let's continue the civility of the meeting. First off, I want to thank you for being here tonight. It took some degree of courage to come here, and you've been incredibly patient and very attentive. I know it wasn't a pleasant meeting for you, but you had to hear this, and I'm glad that you took it in that vein. I'd like to, as my colleagues did, thank all of you for being here. Thank you for your enthusiasm. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for your courtesy. And thank you for your eloquence. I think we all have a genuine interest in transportations, and we want to be as effective as we can and be cost effective, and then look at the effect on the city as well. I recently had an experience where I had to go into Washington, D.C., and I drove up to Bowie State and got on the train. And in about 20 minutes, I was in Union Station, walked to my meeting, walked back to the train station, got back to Bowie Station. They were kind enough to give me a senior citizen discount. But I think we will continue to reach out. We're going to reach out to the Environmental Planning Group and the Federal Railroad Administration to get their points of view. We have, just so you know, we already have had a couple of meetings with our county and state and federal folks. We had an opportunity over the last weekend to meet with our two U.S. senators, and they're aware of our concerns. I want to thank our county and state representatives that attended tonight. We truly appreciate their interest and their leadership on this, and your leadership is going to be tested on this. And we know it'll be a challenge for you, but we know you're up to it. I guess at the end of the day, when you look at things that have some self-evident appearance of being a good thing, your position about the transportation needs over the next 20, 30 years are probably sound. But the question is, how do we get from here to there with minimal intrusion and effect on the quality of life of the people that will be doing that transportation? I'm just not sure this is the way. But we'll continue to talk and we'll continue to look forward. I think the one message that I have to leave with you is that, to paraphrase the president, who often says he's not the president of the world, he's the president of the United States. We are not the council of the world. We're the council of Bowie. And we want to, we have an incredible situation here. You heard references about how great this place is, and it is. I genuinely feel sorry for people who don't live here. We divide the world here into two groups, people who live here and people that should. And you heard the reference about, if you want to see what Bowie's all about, go to any ball field in the city on a Saturday morning, and you'll see a veritable United Nations of people out there with parents and grandparents and kids playing ball. And parents are doing what parents and grandparents do all over the world. They're embarrassing their children. But it is a great town. It's taken us a long time to get here. We're proud of our history, and we really have an obligation to honor that history. So like I said, I think you got a clear message about where we are. We will again talk, and I don't know where we are really. I mean, I've heard the same contradictory observations from our contacts in Annapolis and the governor's office about whether this is a thing done, or whether it's a 20-year plan, or whether it's a 50-year plan, whether it is a 50-50 deal. So we're trying to diffuse all of those options, and like I said, the fortunate thing for us is we have a very strong team with the city and the county and the state, and we are going to work with one voice on this. And like I said, we've already met with our federal people, and they know what our concerns are. So I don't think this will be a non-contentious debate as it goes forward. I would encourage you to stay engaged, stay involved. Ralph, you're pretending to hear like me. You can't hear me? You're always this way, Mr. Calmus. But I do thank you for coming here. I do thank you for bringing us along. We will reach out, like I said, to the planning group and to the railroad group to get their perspectives, because obviously, as you said at the beginning, you speak for your component, and they'll have to speak for us. Clearly, the pathways are just totally unacceptable. So we'll just have to see what other options, alternatives exist. It may be we can talk our way through this, maybe we can persuade our way through this. I would hope that that's the case. But if that's not the case, we'll just line up and do whatever we have to do. So thank you again, and thank you all again tonight for staying here for a long time and speaking your mind and doing it so peacefully and civilly and eloquently. With that, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, can you do your duty?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move
I'm sorry. Did you want to make a comment, Mr.
Councilman Turner.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem, Mr. Mayor.
Good evening, former colleagues. It's always good to be back here in City Hall here in Bowie. I apologize for being a little bit late. We had session this evening down in Upper Marlboro talking about Board of Health issues, which I do want to bring to your attention as we're related to the opioid issues that are going on not only in Prince George's County but in the state of Maryland. There's some useful information I think perhaps we can get our Department of Health to come down and give you a briefing on. They broke it down by districts and areas. So some interesting information that we found out this evening, so I apologize for being late. I wasn't planning to speak. I came here to listen, just like you did. Unfortunately, I wasn't here for the presentation. However, the County Council did have a presentation, I think, back in January. Very limited presentation before us. Obviously, some of you know I do chair our Transportation, Housing, and Environment Committee. And speaking with the leadership today, we know we're going to have them back before us in a more formal setting, as this has proceeded a little bit quicker than I think was reflected in the conversation that they had with us earlier this year. Obviously, I've heard clear from the residents, both in the city of Bowie and outside, because it impacts my entire district for some of the alignments that are being considered. So, like you, we need to do our homework and work with our partners that we have locally, but I'll be honest with you, from my perspective, I'm not going to toss stones, but this is a project of Governor Hogan. So if you want to lobby and influence, you need to start where it started. So, and I think I can say that, and we can work with our federal partners. We've had the opportunity to sit down with Steny Hoyer, Anthony Brown, Senators Van Hollen, and we're getting, I believe, Senator Cardin in for his annual meeting soon. And so I have raised this issue about what the federal response is, since it is a Federal Railroad Administration focused project, even though it is very interesting that while the MTA is involved, the information that's being provided is by the private entity here, and that's usually not the case in some of our NEPA processes before. It's the government that is making the case for or against a particular project. So we are listening. We will have the representatives, and hopefully it includes the state representatives come before us. But I think I've heard clearly tonight, as you have, where our residents are. And so I, at this point, don't see the benefit to Prince George's County as well as to the city of Bowie for this project. I also happened to serve for 8 years when I was here on the City Council and for a couple of years on the Prince George's County Council on the Transportation Planning Board. They have not taken a position on this. This is not part of any priority letter from the City of Bowie or from Prince George's County. Usually that's the process that we would go through to say this is something that we want as a jurisdiction. That has not been done. And so I believe the county, although it did express some of its reservations in the initial scoping meetings, that we will be coming forward with a position statement, raising some of these issues. The last thing I'll say is we're not alone. Obviously, the Park and Planning Commission, which operates the WB&A Trail, I've had conversations with the chair and the planning director about them getting engaged in this process, because they have not, as the entity that is running the WB&A Trail, have not been contacted about what the impact of potentially using that would be. They were not aware of it, like some of our residents were not aware of this was going forward. So that's kind of where we are. I appreciate the residents coming out. I appreciate working with you as the city council as you make a decision, and we'll be partners along with our state representatives. I'm sorry for being long, but you invited me up, so you know what happens. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I'd like to move to adjourn. Second.
Second by Dr. Trout. Any questions on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you all.